Thank you so much, Penny, and thank you to the Asia Society for bringing this powerful message to Hong Kong and helping to get the word out of this film. I want to share a few words about how the film is made. I think you can all agree after you've seen part of it what an amazing film it is and what a tool it is to talk about a really important issue in our world. I want to tell you a little bit more about Suma, who is the first chapter that you saw from Nepal, who is a girl that Room to Read works with in our program, and tell you a little bit about how we work with girls to ensure that more girls stay in school longer and absolutely change their lives through education. But first, the film. The film is really been a work, as all documentary films are, of a whole lot of incredible people really passionate about the issue of getting the message out about the importance of investing in girls' education and what a profound impact this can have. It took over 4 years to make this film. The full length of the film is chapters of 9 different girls from 9 different countries. They chose 7 different nonprofit partners, such as Room to Read, that work with girls on a daily basis in the developing world to help bring to life their stories. And what was really unique about the film is that they actually chose authors from each country to interview, if you will, and bring to life the story. So I think a lot of the creative power of the movie and of telling these girls' stories and the amazing cinematography came from their very creative approach to it. The authors spent much time with the girls. They went to their communities. They met their families. They really helped to bring to life what are obviously very strong and powerful messages. And actually, through making of this film, although only 9 girls' stories made it into the film, hundreds of girls were interviewed. And I encourage you to go to the girlrising.com website because there's a lot of other just as impactful stories of girls out there. And that really is, I think, one of the unfortunate messages of the film is that this is a very big and widespread issue. And the challenge is that despite so much progress and growth that we've had in our world around us, the fact is that 773 million people are illiterate in the world. 2/3 of them are women and girls. Every day, more than 100 children don't go to school. 66 million of them are girls. The most at-risk part of our population is to grow up in the developing world as a girl. The UN estimates that 80–90% of the world's work in the developing world is done by women, yet only 10% of the income is earned by them, and only 1% of property is in the name of a woman. And property really, of course, is just another name for political power, economic power. So if you were to grow up in sub-Saharan Africa as a girl, only 1 out of 5 would ever make it to secondary school, which means by the age of 15, you are more likely to be raped than you are to be in school in sub-Saharan Africa. I could go on and on and on, unfortunately, with the statistics just to bring home how large an issue this is. It's been called the crime of the century, actually, how women and girls are treated. If you think of last century of slavery, this is really the current crime of humanity. And so what we're trying to do as a nonprofit is to find solutions to this very challenging issue. And I think that the reality is, and hopefully the message of the film is, that there is hope. Change is coming, as they say in the end of the Afghanistan chapter. And that change is about empowering girls through education to be able to create a different world around them. And the really fantastic part about this is that we know how to educate girls. This is not something we have to invent. This is not something that we, need to think long and hard about. It's something we can go out and we can do now. And we can actually change the lives of this generation of girls. And the fact is, if you get a girl in school, you will delay marriage for her. Oftentimes, by 12, 13, in the countries that we're working in, girls are married off. But if a girl stays in school, that can be delayed to post-secondary school. Every year that a girl remains in high school or in secondary school, her earning income goes up by 15 to 20%, which means if she makes it through the end of 12th grade, she actually has a totally different life, not only for herself, but for her family and for her community. There's many ripple effects to educating women. Lower infant mortality, better health and family nutrition. The number one factor of whether a child grows up literate is if there is an literate mother in the household. So there's as it's often called, the best investment you can make in the developing world is to invest in women and girls. And I think the great part about this film is that you start to see that in some of these girls' lives. And so I'll use Suma, who is the girl that was featured from Room to Read's program in Nepal, as an example. As you heard, she lives in a very remote part of Nepal called Bardia. And it still practices, although illegal for many years now, a traditional system, Kamlari system, where girls for $250 are sold into indentured servitude for the rest of their lives from very poor families. And Suma was sold at the age of 6. And Room to Read partners with a local nonprofit that rescues these girls back. And then Room to Read helps to mainstream them back into school and to keep them in school and work with their families around the importance of looking at the long-term trade-offs around, selling a girl versus remaining in school. And so we're able to actually work with the families and the community to keep the girls from being sold back into the system, and to hopefully, as many now are graduating. We have over 1,000 girls now that we've worked with, like Suma, in this one district of Nepal. We have over 22,000 girls in Room to Read's education programs, girls' education program in 10 different countries in Asia and Africa. But Suma herself has now become, at the age of 13, she was rescued and mainstreamed back. 2008, we started working with her. And she's now become a really amazing advocate in her own right for being able to talk about this Kamlari system and the need to stop it, and what ramifications it has, not only on her as an individual, but all of the girls in her community. And as you saw, as the girls started to sing at the end, they have now come together as a force and are starting to, not only in their own local villages, to advocate for rights, but now have held, in the last year, several gatherings in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, to help bring more power to the message and to help get the government to actually enforce the fact that the Kamlari system is illegal. And you're starting to see that change because of the girls themselves standing up. She is now studying for the student leaving certificate, which is a graduation certificate at the end of 10th grade, and wants to be a health worker to be able to come back to her community to work in the healthcare world for women. And the fascinating part of the story is that through this film, she actually got a trip to Manhattan to be part of the Women in the World Conference, because they saw her as such a strong advocate. She writes her own poetry and she writes her own songs, and they asked her to both open and close the Women in the World Conference, which happens once a year and gathers women, powerful leaders of politics and business and entertainment industry together in Manhattan to make a difference for girls around the world. She actually was one of only 2 people in the whole conference last year who got a standing ovation from the entire audience. She followed Secretary Clinton and Meryl Streep on the stage to close the show, and she brought the house down. And when she came off stage, and I was lucky enough to be in New York that week with her, she said, do they think they heard me? Do you think they heard me? And I opened up the curtain. I said, look at this entire Lincoln Center. They heard you. They heard your message. And it was amazing to see the transformation of her viewpoint of Manhattan and what that experience was like. This was a girl who had never been to Kathmandu before this film, much less to New York. But she was so perceptive. Everyone kept asking her, oh, don't you like New York? Don't you like New York? And she kept saying, no, actually, I don't. I don't really know. It's difficult here. There's there's a lot of noise. It's not as beautiful as my own home. And as you started to listen to her, she started to ask really intelligent questions. Probably the most profound question she asked was, we were sitting around at lunch with a number of people, and she said, I see that you in America have the same problem that we do in Nepal. And I said, Suma, what is, and this is through a translator. We have one of our girls' education officers traveling with her. And I said, well, what problem is that? And she says, well, I see that all the dark people do all the work in your country too. They open the doors, they wash the dishes, they serve the food, they drive the cars. And this, of course, was very true. And as you started to talk about the message with her of racism, of slavery, of what our country in America has gone through and what Nepal is going through in many ways, and the parallels, it was very deep and it was very profound for everyone at that table who could hear through her eyes what she observed. And so I think that the message is that as she has grown in her ability to become an advocate, not only in her own country, but around the world for girls, there is hope, because there's hope that this can change, that there's hope that by empowering these girls, they will create the change. And that's what Room to Read is all about. We work with the girls to not only keep them in school, but by providing them scholarships if they need the financial support, but even more importantly, I think, is what we do in two other aspects of the program. We provide female role models and mentors in the community that work with the family and the girls very closely to understand the challenges that they face outside of school that may be preventing them from staying in school. And then we run life skills workshops, which are all about the skills that you really need to succeed in life outside of just the formal academic tutoring. It's about interpersonal skills, communication skills, leadership, problem solving, goal setting, health and hygiene, financial savviness. You have a whole 30 life skills framework sessions that we will run over the course of the 6-7 years that we're working with those girls, from the rates of dropout around 5th, 6th grade through the end of 12th grade. And you see a girl who goes through that program absolutely change fundamentally in her belief in herself and what she deserves in her life, and her ability to advocate for that in her community. And I think that's what you're going to see more and more of. I firmly believe that one day it's probably a lot more likely that my 7.5-year-old daughter will grow up to still wonder if there will ever be an American female president, but that one of the girls on the Room to Read's girls' education program will grow up to be a prime minister or a president in her country. Because the fact is that in many of the countries we work in, it is a merit-based system in a lot of these developing countries, and you can, through education, fight to get many more opportunities than maybe perhaps in our own systems. And there are many examples of girls now that are being able to rise up and being able to work outside of the home and being able to make a difference in businesses and the government and in many community civil rights organizations that I think really lends hope. And so really, I think that the film brings to life the fact that, through these girls' stories, hopefully we can all get engaged in this issue and we can all help to create that change. One of my favorite lines in the film is that girls are not the problem, they're part of the solution. And so I think that the power of being able to talk about these issues, being able to challenge ourselves, to look around in our own lives, some of the assumptions we make, and to find ways to help mentor and create opportunities for girls around the world is a really important issue. So again, I thank you for coming out. We have a great chapter here of Room to Read in Hong Kong that does a number of different events here. There's information in the back as you go out. We'd love for you to tell people about the film. We as a nonprofit have the ability to show the film to private groups. CNN owns the international rights, and so it's shown on CNN, and there'll be more public events via TV on CNN coming internationally, and then working with Room to Read, we're able to show it in private settings, and we welcome the opportunity to work with you to help spread the word. So with that, I will pause and would love to take questions on the film itself, on Room to Read's work, or share any other experiences that people have in the room around this important issue. Yes.
I work in Darjeeling, that's northern India, very much like what you have seen in Nepal.
Maybe you can use.
My name is James Keir. I'm an NGO. I work in the field in the Darjeeling area, northern India,
Yes.
like in Nepal. I relate very much to the first film. I also have worked in Calcutta. One of the problems I find is that a lot of the children in our villages, we do village development, are dropouts. And there is a problem of getting them back into the mainstream. We need to do more work for them in terms of vocational service. And I'd like to put that to you, to please find a way to get these people who don't pass the 5th standard. The vocation training schools need them to be 10 standard, all right? But they don't even pass the 5th. 60% of the children in the villages we find are dropouts.
Yes.
And we need to find a solution for that.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And it's a great point. The story of Suma, she actually goes through, and girls like her go through a year-long bridge course, and that's something that's very common oftentimes in India too, where we work as well in India, and helping to to catch up and go through 6, 7 grades of remedial training to be able to be mainstream. But you're right. The problem is that there are these gateways, oftentimes in transitions from middle school to upper school, and different gateway exams that a lot of children are not able to get through. And so one of the things that, in addition to the life skills workshop, the things that I mentioned, is working in partnering ourselves, doing some of the training ourselves and partnering with others to find ways to bring a more of a vocational, whether it be, oftentimes practices around running a small business out of, your home, being able to do, things like sewing or going to a preschool center. There's a lot of opportunities that we have found in the communities that we're working in to provide opportunities for employment and furthering education for the girls. I think that the bigger challenge, though, that we're really addressing starts with the quality of education in many of the schools. And so the reason also why a lot of children, boys and girls, are not being able to pass some of these important transitions in school is because the quality is so poor, starting in the government schools and as soon as they enter. Room to Read's work, actually, another key part of our work is in early grade literacy. And so what we see is exactly what you're saying. Oftentimes 60-70% of kids by grade 2 have fallen behind grade appropriate levels, and they never get the basic foundations in reading, writing, and numeracy. And so addressing the quality of the education issue, once you get kids into school, that's a great and important step, but then you actually have to ensure that learning takes place, and supporting the early grade focus so that by the time they're in 4th, 5th grade, they're actually able to keep up with subject level knowledge learning that takes place is a very big challenge in the developing world, and that's why we focus on the early grade literacy piece. So it's a complex issue. There's many parts to it, both vocational training, the quality of education in many of the government schools, and then providing opportunities, even as children leave school at different stages, what type of opportunities they may still have to be able to be economically independent. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful film. Thank you for a wonderful film. How does Room for Read decide which countries to actually work in? And then within those countries, the heartbreaking decision is who do you actually sponsor and how do you choose them?
Right. Well, so we're in 7 countries in Asia and 3 in Africa now. And so the work that we do, and unfortunately, there's a lot of need for what we do. So the biggest challenge, the biggest constraint for us is actually a financial constraint. We actually have a pretty replicable model that we have been able to work across a wide variety of countries, and we have many countries that would like Room to Read to come to their areas, but our biggest challenge is actually raising funds in order to be able to continue to expand, because once we work in a country, you make a long-term commitment to helping to change the educational system. So we don't want to go and expand in a new country by cannibalizing the work that we're doing in a current country. But largely it's, the basic factors are around the need for an investment in primary and secondary education and the quality issues that you see and the dropout rates, and the lower performance rates of girls are kind of the factors that we mainly look at. Unfortunately, that can be a very consistent situation that you see in many of the developing countries. So that doesn't narrow the field necessarily. But getting to your question of how do we pick the communities that we work in and how do we pick the girls themselves, there's 2 key things that we do. We work only in the government education system. So by partnering with the government, we're not trying to create a parallel private system. We're actually trying to invest within the system that's reaching, the last mile, that's reaching the most underserved, at-need communities. So most of the work that we're doing is identifying with the government the most underperforming schools and being able to work with our literacy program in those schools. Or secondly, for the girls' education program, we're actually identifying schools that have gender verifiable differences of girls' and boys' performance. Because the reality is that poverty impacts boys just as much as girls. So you don't want to actually just go to a poor area. We actually are looking for areas where you see girls either not attending school at the same rates, not performing as well in exams, not passing and advancing grades, not making transitions from primary to secondary rates at the same as boys. And those are the areas that we then work with our girls program. And we actually take all girls in a class. So we don't want to hand select girls and create a sense of difference. We actually work with all the girls in a school once we start to work in a community. And what we do is the financial support is given to girls only in need, determined by poverty levels of their family. But the things like the life skills workshops, academic support, and mentoring, all of the girls in the community can be a part of that. So that you really start to create a cohort of girls that actually is very powerful. And you see actually more girls coming back to school oftentimes when you create this sense of synergy amongst girls coming together, having a safe place to talk about these issues, working with female mentors, and even actually now, because of the issue of how do you work with the boys has come up quite a bit. Oftentimes in our life skill workshops, we invite boys into those as well. Many of the conversations you have around communication skills or leadership skills, you need to have that conversation with boys and girls. So a lot of the life skills works that we're doing, help certainly all the girls in the school and often all of the children in order to really create a sense of unity around this issue. Thank you. Yes.
What you're doing is great. I really admire your good work. My question is around the economics. What happened? I mean, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? If the girl isn't educated or the child isn't educated, then they can't get a good job. But if they are educated, are there jobs available for them to take? One of the first things that I thought of when I saw Zuma going back to her parents was, oh my God, how can they afford to look after her? That's another. They've sold her because they need the money. And are you also? I assume you are helping these children find work as well after they've been educated, because that would be pretty depressing, wouldn't it, if they couldn't find work?
Yeah, and so there are many economic challenges, and again, addressing this issue of what I think that the way that we approach it is by being able to first look at 12th grade as a huge accomplishment. We work with a lot of groups where we'll help to be a liaison for them to go into a micro lending program or a vocational training program or different opportunities. But at the end of the day, I think that we also shouldn't look at working in a formal sector. Not working in a formal, employment sector as a failure either. I mean, at the end of the day, these are girls that could not read a medicine bottle. If they had not stayed in school, they could not, help to teach their children to read. They could not help to understand, perhaps how to help their family, on the farm to read, agricultural, seeds and different things that can help to, raise the economic standard for their entire family. There's many ways in which just being empowered through education can still help, even if they don't go into a formal work sector. So I think that, one of the things that you start to see is that this is an evolutionary cycle, right? It's not going to happen just in one generation. It's going to happen over time. And successes need to be measured, in small steps, not in, sort of the expectation that everything is going to change all at once. And I think that what we have seen is actually, pretty phenomenal in the sense that the girls that we're working with, the ones that we have tracked that have graduated past 12th grade, when our formal funding ends, 72% of them have gotten university or tertiary or vocational training scholarships, which actually was pretty astounding to us. And that's because there's so few girls that actually get as far as they have. And so there's many government and other programs that have been able to work with the girls. So I do think in our particular, and we're still very small, obviously, part of the overall issue, you do see a lot of opportunities if you can get them through the end of 12th grade that will take them, a lot farther. Yes, in the back.
I mean, I'm pretty much amazed by the documentary, also by the stories. But actually, I have a question. But I mean, ultimately, how do your colleagues persuade parents to have the little daughters educated by your partners?
Yes, the issue of parental engagement is a big one. So to be part of Room to Read's program, for example, and I know many other programs like ours, the parents have to sign on to parent workshops and to being part of the process of keeping the girl in school, because they are critical in terms of changing their mindset, in terms of having them understand the long-term opportunity of keeping a girl in school that will help her and her whole family and community versus the short-term trade-offs of pulling her out of school to work in the family or to work in a factory, et cetera. that is a conversation the whole family has to get behind and has to have. And so we do a lot of work with the parents to start before we even, start the program in a community to really engage them. Now, you have a wide range of responses, of course, to that, and from parents, and some parents, don't want to have their girls participate, and others are very eager. And oftentimes, of course, it's the mothers that are leading the way, and they kind of pull the fathers in to the workshops. But over time, we've seen because we're not really addressing it from a issue of religion or broader societal issues, we're really addressing it from the opportunity to be educated and keeping it a fairly neutral message to start. You see parents getting on board. Now, we know that over time, what we're seeing is that these girls start to advocate for things to really change. They advocate for change in their school. They develop leadership councils. They advocate at home. And it does, again, through, kind of a cycle and an evolution and a generational change, it is very empowering for women. But what we have found the easiest way is just to focus on the education piece, and then you have less resistance initially from the parents. In particular from the elder males and the fathers. I mean, I think the great thing, the rest of the film, which you haven't seen all of it, is that they showed a number of fathers that were and brothers throughout the film that were actually quite supportive. And I think that's an important message too, because having been in this work for 13 years now, I will say, by and large, I meet most of the times far over 50% very supportive male elders in the community that are probably not given the voice, and once that voice is there, they start to speak louder about this being an important issue. So I do think, again, that change is shifting in terms of perceptions. Yes.
Hello, I'm Alex from the University of Hong Kong, and thanks for being with us. I have a question about the Millennium Development Goals for you, and the MDGs, they pretty much focused on the enrollment rate of children. And for the post-2015 development agenda, what sorts of fresh inputs that you have? After all, when the MDGs, they are formulated 12 years ago, great organizations like Room to Read, Khan Academy, One Laptop Per Child, they pretty much excluded from the process. So what sorts of advice that you can give those people doing the post-2015 thing? Thanks.
Yes, and it's great. So the Millennium Development Goals, as I'm sure most of you know in the audience, is a rallying call, really, that helps to focus governments on creating very specific agendas and targets for how they want to see change in addressing the alleviation of poverty. And there are a couple of critical goals in there for education in terms of universalizing primary education and having parity for girls. Now, the reality is we're not quite there, but there has been a lot of good progress in getting children, into school and even the playing field for girls. I think that the missing, as you're saying, sort of beyond what's going to happen beyond 2015 is first sort of getting the last mile of every child in school, which is not the case yet, although it's been there's been progress. But more importantly, it's about addressing the quality of education. It gets back to this quality education issue, which is, the big shift was butts in seats, as they said, get kids into school. And what you've started to see is that some kids are now dropping out of school once they actually worked very hard in countries. Kenya, as an example, they started to got a lot of universalized education, a lot of kids into school, and then they started seeing kids drop out of school around the 5th, 6th grade because the quality was so poor, and they weren't learning anything. And so, at a certain point, they might as well have gone and done something else more fruitful for their family. And so now I think that what you're going to see in the Millennium Development Goals, and we are actually as nonprofits being much more consulted, the good news is this time around, is people really wanting to address not just having numbers like equal girls and boys or, getting kids in school, but actually addressing issues around quality. And for girls, a big issue is that parity is not success. Just you can clearly see by showing up in just about any school in the 10 countries that we work in, that just simply being in school does not actually mean that girls get treated the same as boys. In fact, oftentimes they're targeted to take on more responsibilities at school just as they do at home. They're often asked to help clean, to wipe down the whiteboards, to cook the rice in the kitchen. Boys are encouraged to study and given extra attention, and girls are often pulled into other side activities around the school. And so a lot of what you're seeing is girls not performing as well. And so, yes, girls are getting into school in larger numbers, but then the issue is addressing it from a position of making sure that girls are performing as well in school. So again, it's more of a quality issue piece. And I think that's where in the next Millennium Development Goals from 2015 beyond, will be focused. Any last question before we close? I know it's getting late. It's a school night. Well, thank you so much. Again, is there one more question here? Yes, go ahead.
My name is Sanat, and I'm a journalist. I'm based in Pakistan. I waited a bit for the questions to end because mine was more of a comment. Firstly, you do incredible work, and I've followed Girl Rising for years, and your work and the work that you do is absolutely amazing. But the comment that I had is more in terms of, how aid works and how initiatives, especially those that are not stemmed from the countries themselves, are very counterproductive at times because of the way they're perceived in the countries that they're working in. I have worked with Malala and her school for 5 years, even before the incident happened. And some of the things that you said really struck. For example, when you spoke about the fact that in developing countries, women might have more opportunities to become the president or the prime minister, whereas in the developing countries that they don't. What I saw missing in the documentary, and when I see missing when a lot of people talk about the work they do, enabling people worldwide, is that it suddenly becomes their voice. And their voice is that of privilege. And it seems that, coming from a privilege, which we all do, not only you, which we all do, we are enabling something for the other, which isn't so. Malala is Malala, and there are 10,000 Malalas in southern Pakistan because of who she is. And the work that you do is incredibly important to them. It is unimaginably important to them. It's an enabler to what they do. But the way that it's perceived and the language that we speak, whether it's in this audience enabled or in some others, is really, really counterproductive. And that is one of the most biggest hurdle. I am a journalist, so I'm talking in terms of language, but I'm also a human rights activist. So I see how that language or that framing of a scenario then brings home a message that is, we don't want this, or we want to shut out. And currently, from where I come from, this is what we are going through. And a lot of it has to do with the conversation that's happening from the outside, rather than the politics within. So that's all that.
No, I think I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it's a very challenging topic. It's, the issue of empowerment and how do you create, empowerment from within to be able to create the solutions that work best for each community, for each country is absolutely, I could not agree with you more. My point would be, though, that that's exactly why we're, for example, so focused on education. I cannot think of a problem in the world that would not be solved without a strong educated population in every community. Environmental issues, political participation, gender, peace, justice, agricultural, public health care, all of them have an education component. And so, how it gets done and the dynamics of that, absolutely. It's a big challenge in the development world. I think that having voices, like the film is trying to have the girls be the voices and tell the stories of themselves, having the authors from the country, they thought very deeply about trying to have the voices come from those girls, is one way to try to bring that. For our model, for example, at Room to Read, all of our country staff, from our country directors all through, are all local nationals. We have no expatriates throughout our entire network, which many other nonprofits do. For exactly that reason, we want to be able to develop local solutions and walk our own talk. We want, local strength and advocates who are creating change in India or Zambia or Tanzania or Sri Lanka where we work to be able to create that change internally and help to give them a voice and a platform. So I do think trying to think through models that can bring those voices up and bring the empowerment piece to it is incredibly helpful. So thank you for the comment. Well, with that, I will close and just, again, please spread the word. Girl Rising is a great tool to be able to talk about this important issue, and thank you so much all for coming tonight.
Thank you, Erin. And on behalf of the Asia Society, a very, very small gift. This is our notebook, but a very, very big thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.